Antonio Brown has finally returned to training camp after missing the last week as he recovered from frostbitten feet due to cryotherapy gone wrong. Earlier this week, AB lost his grievance against the NFL to wear his old helmet. Since then, he has found a model that's been made within the past 10 years that the NFL will likely allow him to wear. Star wideout says he's excited to be back with the team. Former Steelers Super Bowl winning head coach Bill Cowher told CBS that AB is a very talented receiver, but he does sometimes create headlines that can be disruptive to a football team. Raiders coach Jon Gruden said he and AB have a good understanding and he is expected to play in Week 1. We're now joined by FS1 NFL analyst Eric Mangani. Eric.
They let you back in the building after that performance yesterday?
Yeah. I had to go get a massage because that beatdown wore me out.
He's on fire out of the gate.
Yeah,
Eric.
I'm surprised you wanted me back.
Will Antonio Brown help or hurt the Raiders this season?
Well, it's going to be a little bit of both.
Yes.
And he's one of these guys that we talk about a lot who's unbelievably talented, and there's some management issues. And you when you take chances like that, you've got to manage 6 days to get to the 7th day, to get to game day, and that's where the production and that's where the value comes in. So there's that component of it, and he's going to be incredibly productive if he plays. What's it, 6 straight years of 100-plus catches, and the things that you have to do defensively to handle him, that'll open up so many other things. Now, the problem is the other 6 days, if you're trying to create a certain culture, and this still is a new program, it's only in the 2nd year of the program, and when you look at who they drafted and the type of guys they drafted, and all highly regarded and from a character perspective, when you combine these two things, it's very mixed messages. And when you preach in the locker room one thing, that's great. You can say everything you want, but the guys know you value what you pay. You value what you pay. So wherever you put your money, the players in the locker room know, okay, it's okay to be like that. That's what this organization values. And that's the danger when you mix in situations like this.
Don't players also realize if you can produce? You know, if you're not producing, you can't have the antics. So they do, and I agree with you, but I still believe that they look and they go, when you look at these eye-popping numbers that you just talked about, and this is a guy, Jerry Rice only did it 3 times. He's done it 6 times, still active. Last year, 15 touchdowns in 15 games. Nobody as a receiver has put up the numbers that he has. He's been incredible. So I think players, yes, they look at it. And the other part is I think Jon Gruden's star and brightness, right, fits in a little bit. He's not your typical coach. He's out there, very visible. I would say not stoic at all, camera hungry, soundbite kind of guy. So he fits in with AB, and you do know once you sign a guy like that, you're going to have to make some concessions, no?
You absolutely know that. And you go into it with your eyes wide open, and he's done this in the past. Now, the difficulty is when you work as hard as you work as a coach, and it looks like Jon works pretty hard, and you put together that game plan is predicated on people knowing what to do and being in the right spots, and that's everybody knowing what to do. And you're always limited by either your hardest learner or the guy that works the least, and I mean from a learning standpoint. So if he wants to shift and motion and have multiple formations and do all those things, and you don't have a guy who's putting it in the classroom, or it limits you, that can be very frustrating to especially a guy like Jon who does so many things, and you hear it all the time about the length of his call sheet and things along those lines. And from a cultural perspective, yeah, guys respect talent. Guys respect production, but the guys, it still is a community in the locker room. And it's hard as a coach to say, we demand this from everybody but you. Okay, and then everybody else looks around the room and says, okay, I get he's a good player, but I'm a good player too. So why don't I have that same leeway?
Yeah, Greg, you see where he's going with this, right?
I see where he's going, but I mean, he helps the Oakland Raiders. And let me just touch on this really quick. In the locker room, guys understand that it's just what takes place. There's a protocol. There's a hierarchy. Whether it's your quarterback, whether it's your star running back, whether it's your star receiver, defensive end, doesn't matter. there's a hierarchy, and guys look to that guy and say, hey, you have the coach's endorsement. Can you do this for us? Can you do that? It's not so much that they want to be that guy or they want to act that to the extremes of that individual. They don't need to, because that individual is going to be who they are, and they're going to be who they need to be. But we're going to use this individual as leverage.
To set the tone?
Yes, to set the tone, but also to be the voice of reason. Because, as you said, the coach obviously has endorsed this, which rightfully so, because he understands the magnitude of impact that he will have when he's on the football field. And that's all this is about. The fact that Antonio Brown has not been able to practice, that we haven't seen him actually in training camp and producing and being a part of that offense and learning with these guys and building a rapport with Derek Carr right now during training camp. That's what this is all about. Once that happens, all of this cryotherapy, and helmet, we're not talking about that any longer.
Yeah,
Production can erase that, but Greg, very rarely do you meet with a player who says, you know, I'm not as good as that other guy, so I should be treated poorly. I should be treated, not poorly, but I should be held to a totally higher standard than him because I'm not as good as him. Most players you interact with, they feel like they're as good as the next guy. So it would be an interesting dynamic if you had a whole locker room that said, okay, he can act any way that he wants to act, and I'll follow all the rules. But that doesn't always take place. Usually guys come in and say, you did it for him, why aren't you doing it for me?
That happens typically when your locker room is full of a variety of guys, both veteran and young guys. But as a young guy, you bring in young guys, they're not going to concern themselves with what Antonio Brown is doing because everything is new to me. So I don't know. I see this, but I know I can't do that.
You'll be off the team.
Look, I remember Asante Samuel, and I love Asante, and Asante is early in his career.
So you're ripping on him. Go ahead.
No, I'm not ripping on him. I love Asante, and I love Ty Law, okay? And Ty Law had been there and been productive and signed a $100 million contract or whatever it was, and he had certain leeways in the defense that Asante Samuel didn't have. But Asante was still in the office going, well, why can't I do that?
Yeah.
Why can't I do that? And this was early in his career, and obviously Asante went on and had an amazing career, but at that point he was held to a different standard because he had done different things from a production standpoint. But he saw how this guy was treated, and he said, well, why can't I do that?
Eric, I want to focus on the Bill Cowher comments because these guys are glossing over it. This is a guy who has been with the Steelers forever. Mike Tomlin knows him well. We haven't heard any Steelers talk about Antonio Brown. No veiled shots.
They turned the page.
Oh, have they? What do you make of the Cowher comments calling Antonio Brown disruptive? To me, I wonder, is this Mike Tomlin and the Steelers' way of speaking through Bill Cowher?
No, I think that Mike Tomlin, I respect Mike a lot, and I've always felt that Mike will say what he feels, and there's no value in the Pittsburgh Steelers continuing to have a disagreement with a player that's no longer there.
Right.
They said all they needed to say when they traded him for a third-round draft pick. That was about as loud a megaphone as the Pittsburgh Steelers could use, because when you got a guy like Odell Beckham who goes for 1 and then you give away Antonio Brown for 3, that's a pretty strong statement. In terms of a guy being disruptive, is anybody surprised by those comments? But you go into it, again, knowing what you're going to get. And as long as you can live organizationally and as a coaching staff with the challenges that come with those guys, then so be it. It's not for everybody. It's not really what happens in New England. You may get some guys who have been disruptive at other places, but they fall in line when they come there, and we see how that worked out.
Look,
what are you shaking your head about?
Because I'm going to tell you why.
You shut him up.
Your silence speaks volumes.
Because you mentioned New England, and I just thought...
He's shaking his head because there's a scripture in the Bible that says love covers a multitude of sins. And so when I look at this Antonio Brown situation, his production covers a multitude of whatever we want to call it. Foolishness, antics, baggage. It covers that up when you continue to produce the way that he's produced over his career as consistently as he's been able to produce over his career. And again, it's not just about the numbers, why he's going to help this Oakland Raiders team become a better team. It's what you mentioned even earlier. Defenses have to now schematically approach the game differently. He's going to open it up for other guys alongside of him.
Carr, right?
Derek Carr is going to be better of it. Derek Carr had 19 touchdowns last year. 19 touchdowns, 10 of which were to tight ends. That means 9 were to his receivers. His leading receiver was Jordy Nelson, who's no longer in the National Football League and wasn't even close to being a shell of himself that we saw with the Green Bay Packers. So now you add on an Antonio Brown, and you're willing to tell me that he's going to hurt this team? He's not going to help them? That's just, it doesn't even make sense.
But too much is made, though. Too much. I think, especially when you don't have games, and he has, since he left Pittsburgh, and all the other noise outside. I agree, once he starts to play and he's back on the field, it's going to be about football. And we'll remember how good he is, and we'll see all the numbers, all the touchdowns, everything he's done. I think so much is made because you don't have that stuff to be able to draw from now, so it's all the other noise. The helmet thing became some big deal because a guy wants to hold on to his helmet that he's worn for 10 years in the National Football League.
It became a big deal because he left practice. That's why it became a big deal. Yeah, he can hold on to his helmet.
It's supposed to be enough practice because of his feet.
You have lawyers. Your lawyer can go handle that. You can do all the things that he did in relationship to the league while still being at practice, while still being at meetings. The big deal wasn't about, okay, it's his helmet. It's about that he wasn't in the building. And you hear the comments from Jon Gruden, do you know when he'll be back? I don't know when he'll be back. Has anybody seen my receiver? You know, so there's that speaks volume as well. Curtis Martin, when I took over in New York, said, we were talking about the locker room dynamics, and he said the most important time of the day for any child is the time he spends in the school bus, because there's no teachers there, there's no parents there, and you learn so much. And he equated the locker room to that as well, where you've got a group of guys, and especially the young guys, and the young guys are learning from the older guys, and you want the older guys to be able to set good examples. Does everybody respect talent? Does everybody respect production? Yes, but there's a whole life that is lived leading up to the game in terms of production and effectiveness and using everybody's time the best way. That's a reality.
But Eric, isn't there have been teams that have been disruptive and had all kinds of shady characters and whatnot who have won. It's not always a perfect harmony thing. Everybody's going to be a choir boy. Everybody doesn't work. But everybody's not the same.
They got 22 free agents. 22 free agents, and 3 of them are Antonio Brown, Vontaze Burfict, and Richie Incognito.
You know this.
You know they have a rich history in the locker room.
Look, I'm with Rob here. You are who you are.
Yes.
No one is going to influence you once you've established who you are. A young guy, when I got into Green Bay, when I came into Green Bay, there wasn't anything that any of those guys could do that was going to make me do that. Like, that's not who I was. But if they were doing things that were in a line with my morals and values and what made me better, yes, I was going to do that because that's what I was already coming here to do. But I'm not going to go out and become Antonio Brown and do all the things that he does because that's not who I am. So for us to sit here and make it seem like he's going to have such a huge influence and that teams have never had to experience a guy who comes with who brings high production as well as issues, it's unrealistic. Like, this is not new to the National Football League or sport.
It's not new, Greg, but you're telling me that in all your time you didn't have a mentor? In all your time you didn't mentor younger players? You didn't show young kids the right way to do things versus the wrong way to do things?
I did.
And I think that your character is a little bit different than than everybody else's character. There's a strength of character to you that you aren't going to be influenced. But that's one of the reasons they wanted you.
Right.
They wanted a guy like you in the locker room because of that strength. But not everybody is you. And ideally, you could get a locker room full of people like you with that strength of character. But that's not how it works. And you know that, too. There are a lot of young guys that need help. They need somebody older to say, this is the right way to do things. And when they find that guy, their careers take off in a positive way. And if they find the other guy, their careers tend to be shorter than they hope to be.
Damn.
Agreed.
Man, boy, Eric Mangini just crushing it.
Oh, please, stop
There's
it.
all sorts of
Stop all
conflicting
this
info
Eric praise.
coming
Stop
out
it.
of Indy. How concerned should the
Finally you
Colts
start
be
talking.
about Andrew Luck's injury? That's next.